Hello again, everyone, and here we are in session 2 of Kingdom Fitness. And today we're going to start getting into the nitty-gritty. As you know, last week I laid down the foundation of who this is for, my background, why I'm qualified to teach this, why I am doing this, all of that. But we're really going to start in. I ended the program by saying, make sure you get a notebook, because I'm going to be giving you information or telling you where you can look up your own information. If we were in a class together, I would probably have handouts. And I may, before this thing is over, at least hold something up and tell you where to get it. But so get a notebook, be taking some pertinent notes down. Do beginning measurements, which after this class, I will be doing the same thing. I'm going to take all of my measurements again, and I make myself a chart where it's important to do everything. Bust, chest, yes, there's a difference between the two. Bust takes around your bust, chest is above the bust, it's right here, because you will be losing weight both places. I take it around the waist. The waist, it's different for different people, but wherever it indents the most, and some of us that are apple-shaped, it doesn't indent at all. But you try to go across your belly button for your waist. And abdomen, lower than your waist. And then hips. And then I do right and left thigh, because that's encouraging to go, oh, I've lost an inch on this one and an inch and a half on this one. Now I've lost 2.5 inches on my legs. And people have a hard time knowing where to take it on the thigh. So a good rule of thumb is to measure, like, I'm trying to think what I used to do, either 7 or 9 inches above your knee. But look in your leg and see where is the heaviest place around your thigh. That's where you take thigh measurement. The same thing is true of the calf. The heaviest, the thickest place on your calf muscle is where you take the calf muscle. And I would do right and left. You take hips. Hips go around, believe it or not, the biggest part of your bottom end. So we have chest, bust, waist, abdomen, hips, each thigh, each calf, and then I do arm. And it's hard for me because I am one of those, that's another thing with the loose ligaments. I don't seem to have hardly any elasticity in my skin. And that is partially due to genes. In fact, it looks like a few years ago, they were trying to diagnose me with something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that they discovered, I think, in the 70s, where there are certain factors that go together, loose ligaments, like I talked about last week, and they say no elasticity in the skin, so it doesn't go back in easily. And they even said why these things would be connected. I have no idea. But they say the mouth is usually too small for all the teeth. And this eye tooth over here, I never had come in on this side. It's completely missing. It's not up in the gum. I just never had one. And the dentist just said your mouth was just too small for, believe it or not, people, for all your teeth. And there were 2 or 3 other factors that I have all of them. And they say, that's how they decide you have this. And so I just got to believe God for all of it. But as I've gotten bigger and smaller and bigger and smaller, and the back of this arm has stretched out so much that it's hard to know what's fat and what is skin. And really only qualified experts can sort that out. You know, even when I was very thin and very muscular, at the height of my weightlifting, when Ramus sent me to the hospital, the nutrition hospital, and to the aerobics schooling, they measured our fat content. And it's not a very accurate way to do it. The most accurate way, but it's very expensive, is to go underwater. And although now there are other biometric machines that if you go to the right place, it's supposed to be able to separate body fat from muscle and all of that. But back in the day, it was very primitive. They just measured with a caliper the back of the arm. But the people who did mine were trained to kind of know the difference between skin and fat. And I remember them saying, You have the lowest fat content of anyone in the class, but we can tell your skin is already starting to become lax, but we know that it's skin and not fat. And I wasn't even big back then, and I was young, and I was losing that tissue. So, and that's another reason I always have to wear long sleeves, just because of that. So some of you may have a hard time differentiating, but it's still important because your biceps should be getting bigger as we go through this class, and your fat getting smaller. So try to measure your arm around the biggest part of your bicep the best you can as well. And once a month, whether you decide that's on the 1st, on the 15th, on the 31st, once a month, take all of those measurements again. And you would be surprised. Let's say you've only lost 1/4 of an inch somewhere or a 1/2 inch somewhere else. When you get enough of those, you're like, oh my goodness, I've lost 9 inches of fat or whatever. It's very encouraging because the scale does not always keep up with the fat you are losing. And in fact, there's a lot I need to explain about that. First of all, many people do not realize that muscle weighs a lot more than fat. Back when I was a trainer, they used to say 6 times as much. I can't seem to get the accurate information on that on the web to know if that's what they still have decided. But muscle definitely is denser and heavier than fat. So let me try to explain it this way. Let's say you have 2 ladies, if I have one sitting beside me. Let's say we both weighed 120 pounds, don't I wish? Let's say we were both the same height. But one of us could look a lot fatter or a lot thinner than the other one, because one has a lot of muscle, which weighs a lot more and a lot less fat, and the other one has all fat and almost no muscle. And so you could still have completely different shapes at the same height and the same weight. And that's why I have always encouraged people, you need to incorporate weightlifting into any weight loss plan for several reasons. One, we all, the older we get, need muscle because we are losing muscle rapidly as we age. And to be able to even function and do things like you used to do, you need muscle. Muscle holds off osteoporosis. In fact, I'm so thankful because my grandmother had it. My mother's on medication for it. Small-boned white Caucasians are susceptible to it. But weightlifting is the best number one thing you can do against it. And since I did it for so long and going to start in again now, that helps hold that off. But besides that, muscle is what gives you your shape. I have seen people that lose weight rapidly without weightlifting. And my goodness, they're just a smaller version of themselves. Have you ever seen that? Where somebody might get down to an extreme, let's say they get down to 110 pounds and they used to weigh 200. But they're still jiggling where they used to jiggle. Oh, there's less of it, but it's still jiggling. There's still, if their waist was out of proportion to their hips or vice versa, it's still like that. They have not changed their body shape. They have not tightened up. There's just a lot less of the fat that they used to have. And you see them walking down the street, especially a lot of times people lose weight and so they like to show off in shorts or whatever. But you're thinking, those legs are thin, but they're wobbly and just shaking because they have no muscle there. They did not do any good. Well, I mean, it's always good to lose weight and it's good on your organs and on your health. But as far as changing your shape, I think a person is wasting their time if they don't lift weights with it. They will still not have a good tight shape in the end unless they're just very naturally muscular or very young where they still have a lot of muscle content. So here's the thing. We used to say, and I'm going to use the same example just to get it across, even though it may not be as accurate as far as 6 times. I think now I've heard people say 3 to 4 times. Muscle is 3 to 4 times denser than body fat. So let's just say 3 times to be safe. If I lose an inch of fat like this, and I put on an inch of muscle, I am going to look so much better, but the weight on the scale is actually going to increase. And I'm going to go, oh my goodness, everything I'm doing is to no avail. Look, the scale's gone up, especially us ladies who are so dependent upon that scale. That's why I say not really more than once a week. And even then, if you're putting a lot of muscle on in the beginning, try to ignore that and keep looking at your measurements, because you could lose 3 inches of fat and put on 1 inch of muscle and have it look the same on a scale. Look at how much you've taken off and you've only put this much on, but it can be the same on the scale. And so you've got to understand that density about muscle. And even body mass index isn't very accurate, that everybody goes by for insurance these days, in your doctor's office. Body mass index takes into consideration height and weight, but it really messes up for muscular people, because muscular people are going to weigh a lot more in the scale, even for their height, than somebody with a belly out to here that doesn't have any muscle. And they're going to say, oh, you weigh too much for your age, you're unhealthy. That has to be ignored for muscular people, because it only takes height and weight into account. And some body mass indexes, which you will hear that abbreviated as BMI, some of those are not even separating females and males. And females will always carry a little bit more fat percentage on your body. God made it that way for childbirth, for a lot of things. And let me just add this in. Because of my age, I've just been doing some studying in this class the last couple days about, as you get older, you know, there used to be a saying when I was growing up in the Midwest, everybody that was older was a little plump. And they would all say, oh, you want to have a little extra on you for old age in case you ever get sick. First of all, as Christians and Holy Ghost people, we are saying we are not getting sick. But secondly, you know, I just chalk that up as an old wives' tale and an excuse for them to be fat. But the more I have read lately, they actually are saying that very thin seniors die earlier, have a much harder time with any surgery or any sickness. They're usually malnourished, having a problem with their digestive system. And they said it's always better to have a little bit of extra. I'm studying hospitals and doctors and nutritionists. They say you really do want to have a little extra fat percentage when you get a little. That's not an excuse for being like I am, or several of us are right now. But they used to say anything over 30% BMI is obese, and now they're saying it's good for a senior, a lady in your high 60s probably on, to be at about 30% body mass index. So they say, first of all, if anybody had a problem with their teeth or digestion where they aren't digesting as many nutrients, it's just better to be that way, a little safer than the other way. So I just thought I would throw that out there. But again, BMI does not differentiate between body fat and muscle mass. So you can look at the chart yourself about what BMI should be for different weights, different heights and different seasons of your life. They take your age into account. But they say a 70-year-old or older, that it should be close to 30. And some people try to get their BMI down so low that they're just nutritionally deprived. And it's pretty scary. According to, now I want to talk about how much you should lose a week. And I bet you people are going to scream about this, because we as people, myself included, get so impatient, especially if we feel like we suddenly start starving and depriving ourselves. We feel like it should be 5 pounds a week. That's possible, but not probable. And anything will tell you the healthy amount of weight to lose per week is 2 to 3 pounds per week. And quite frankly, even though we get excited to see more than that go down in the scale, I'm not talking about bigger men. I'm talking about us ladies, and especially us ladies getting older. Actually, if you lose much more than that per week, you're not losing fat anyway. You are losing water in the minute you drink some water, get some fluids in you, it's going to come right back on. Because think about it. It takes 3,500 calories to equal a pound. The average lady, we were just looking it up at my age and my lack of physical activity. I'm working all the time, but usually at a desk, usually in the Word, doing a sermon, sitting, doing a broadcast. Probably the most physical exercise I get is when I preach, because I do a lot of walking when I preach. But that's going to change now. But up till now, I would be considered a very inactive lady. So for my age, if you look it up, I should have to eat no more than about 1,200 calories a day to start losing weight. Now, if 3,500 calories are a pound, I want you to think about that. Normally, my body would probably consume, I would say 1,500 calories a day, 15 to 1,600 a day. So if I start eating 12, how many have I deprived myself of? 400. So take 3,500 divided by 4. It would take me like 9 days to lose a pound looking at that. And so people say, oh wow, I didn't eat much today, I just lost 3 pounds. That's not even possible. You would have to consume over 9,000 calories to lose, underconsume 9,000 calories. So in other words, if I didn't eat anything, if I fasted, if my body normally consumes, we'll say 1,500 calories a day, in 2 days, it would take 2 days of eating nothing to lose 1 pound. So obviously when people say they've lost more than that in a day, they are losing water, which when you start depriving yourself, that glycogen is coming out of muscles and a lot of things are happening. People get excited on the scale, but that is not body fat. And so the smaller increments you lose, but keep it steady, the longer it's going to stay off, the healthier you're losing it, and the more likely it is to be fat, which is what we're trying to lose, not muscle, not water. So I want to really emphasize the fact of not getting discouraged on the scale. But I know when we feel like we're working so hard, and then somebody else comes and you see that they haven't done half of what you've done, and they say they've just taken 3 pounds off in a day or so, you're like, And by the way, ladies, it is also true that as we get older, our metabolism slow and slow and slow. And actually, after menopause, there's a lot of things that are associated, especially with belly fat. I was just reading again about the loss of estrogen as you get older produces belly fat and makes it harder to put on muscle and much easier to put on fat everywhere. And by the way, those of us who are apple-shaped like I am, I'd much rather be pear-shaped. To me, it's much more feminine, the hourglass shape, than the apple. And much more attractive, I think. But we are what we are. I'm very short-waisted. Even when I was thin, I didn't have much of a waist. It was flat in front, but my rib cage is fairly large for my size, and so my ribs and hips were about the same, and I had about an inch in between when you have a very short spine. I'm longer in the legs than I am in the waist, and so when you don't have much waist to begin with, and you put on any weight there, it's easy to become apple-shaped. But they say that that's much more dangerous on the organs, apple-shaped, than pear-shaped. So that's another reason, especially those of us who are apple-shaped, need to get it off. It is pressing body fat against all of those organs and making them difficult to function. Just taking a lot of weight off is going to cure a lot of our problems, folks. Even the weight on the knees, the stress for osteoarthritis, and some of those other things. Just taking weight off is going to help the kidneys function better, the liver function better, obviously the pancreas and the blood sugar to become stabilized. So those are important reasons just for health, even if we didn't look better. But I do want to encourage some of you that went, why when I hit menopause did the weight suddenly start rolling on? They say once you hit that and the estrogen is reduced, that the other factors, stress is harder to control, and just some of the mood swings and all the things that go with that. So there are reasons, they aren't excuses. There's never an excuse. We can overcome anything with the Lord. But there are reasons that at least sometimes make us feel like, okay, I'm not losing my mind. Other people are going through this as well. So again, we recommend 1 to 2 pounds a week of weight loss. Losing more than that can put you at risk for health problems, including muscle loss, gallstones, nutritional deficiencies, and a drop in metabolism. Now, this is hard for people to understand too, but God, being our wonderful, smart, thinking ahead God, put a natural mechanism in our body for survival. And when people do too much of a caloric restriction, here's what happens in the body. The body doesn't know, but what you've been let out in the middle of the desert. There's no food around for miles. But the body says, I'm not going to let this person die. I'm going to slow down there. Obviously, they're getting no food. So we've got to go into survival mode. And I'm going to slow down the metabolism. What all does that mean? I'll slow down the heart rate. I'll slow down how much blood is being pumped through the system. I'll slow down digestion. I'll slow down even what's going to the brain and the thinking processes. That's why you feel so, when you're losing weight or really restrict your calories, you have this brain fog and mood swings and all these other things. The body has gone into survival mode. Now, when it slows the metabolism down that much, so that you're not burning as many calories, just trying to think, okay, they're not getting much food. I'm going to get them into that mode where they're hardly moving, they're hardly breathing, so that they can survive longer without food. Then what happens? When you start to just eat just a little bit, you're thinking, I used to eat this before I lost weight. Why can't I at least stay the same? Why am I putting weight on so fast? You know why? Because you restricted your calories so much that it slowed down the metabolism so much that you can never eat halfway normal again. Now, I am a real candidate of that. Let me explain to you something else I did and be very, very vulnerable with you. In 2015, I was doing everything. I decided, okay, I'm going to start to lose weight. I was at the height of my weight. And I went in on the treadmill. And in the first minute, my face would be as red as a tomato. And I was trying, and my husband would come in and he'd say, Debbie, what are you doing? You look like you're dying. I couldn't breathe. I'm like, in the first 30 seconds. And he'd say, something's wrong. I don't think you should be doing that. And I'd say, I'm desperate. I'm just out of shape. I've got to press through this. I don't care if I feel like I'm dying and can't breathe and red in the face. And this was continuing. I couldn't work out for longer than 5 minutes. And then some other things were happening I'm not going to get into. And then I went in to have some tests. And I went to, the doctor called back. I won't go through all these details except to say, you are in heart failure. I was shocked. Nobody in my family's ever had a heart problem. I've never had a heart problem. I never had high blood pressure. None of the predisposing things that would suggest you're going to get heart problems, except being overweight. Went in and talked to them, and they explained that I was in this stage. There's only 4 stages till you die. And I'm like, what? And I started pressing into healing. Meanwhile, my son called, and he said, Mom, have you ever considered weight loss surgery? Any of the bypasses or anything? And I went, what? And it's my son who's a naval officer, and he's an optometrist. And I said, Josh, I would never consider being whittled away on surgery. And besides that, it's a shortcut. It's for people who can't discipline themselves, blah, blah, blah. I went through this whole preaching episode. And he goes, I realize that, Mom, and I would never suggest it to the ordinary person. But you have been told you can't work out. We're desperate now to give you some time. And he said, I just wish you'd consider it. And I was out in Washington at the time, married to my husband, who's now gone on to be with the Lord. He's a military retiree. We have military insurance. And we went to a military hospital in Tacoma. And I said, I don't even know if this insurance covers it. I don't even know if this hospital does it. I don't know anything about it. Will you just promise me you'll look into it? And I said, all right, I'll promise that I'll just consider it and pray about it. And when I went out, I had a little emergency that I went into the emergency room for. I'll not get into that all right now. But the doctor, there was all these sick patients. And they had said they'd been waiting for 2 hours. And I got called in immediately. And everybody else glared at me like, how are you getting this favor? I go in and this guy hugs me. This doctor I've never met hugs me. As you know, that's unusual. And he was just so friendly, asking me about my previous history. I start telling him about how I was healed of that massive blood clot back in 2006 and how God did it and how I'm not even on medications from that. He begins to cry and lay the chart down. And he says, I know what I'm in here for now. He said, do you know I never work in the ER? I'm a surgeon upstairs. And he said, I am never in the ER, but my own wife is having spine surgery tonight. And she needed a sweater. And I decided to go out to the car to get her sweater. And while going out to the car, the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, volunteer your time tonight in the ER for an hour. And out of the whole list of people, I'll show you who you should bring into the ER. And he said, ma'am, I am a Holy Ghost Spirit-filled Christian, Assembly of God man who wants to be a full-time missionary someday on the foreign field. And we both just stared at each other. And he said, God sent me here. And do you know what my job is as a surgeon upstairs? I said, no. He said, I head up bariatric surgery. Do you know what that is? And I said, yes, weight loss surgery. He said, yes. And God just told me, you've got to take this weight off fast. And I'll have you in the program tomorrow. There's a waiting list, a year and a half for it. And I'll have you in the program tomorrow. And I just went, oh my goodness, my son just called me, asked me to pray about this, consider it. And then I found out there was all these things you have to do to get it that take 6 months. Long story short, I went to one of those appointments and then he said, hey, good news. We just got a call today that if anybody has a medical need, we've been trying to get this for 2 or 3 years in our program and they ignore us. Today we got the call. If we think there's someone who has a medical need to have this done sooner, we can bypass all these other appointments you have to have before you have the surgery. Again, my mouth dropped open. And without going into much more detail, I'll just tell you that later, when I mentioned that to someone else in the hospital, they said, we don't know what you're talking about. We never got a call like that. And everybody else has to wait 6 months. And I didn't say another word. And I had the surgery. It went like, and I don't recommend it for most people, but I'm telling you because of the heart situation. And with me, somehow I just knew this is where my faith was at. I'll lose the weight and trust God to do the rest. Guess what, folks? No sign of congestive heart failure. And the doctors don't know what to make of that because they say it can never be cured. They even told me when I got the weight off, this will extend your life. It'll make you feel better. It'll be easier on the heart, but it will not fix it once you're in congestive heart failure. But mine is fixed. Praise God. God did his part. Again, I felt that is what I had to do. I was a model patient. I didn't even vomit the way they thought that most people do at the beginning. I lost the most. I didn't even do the big bypass. I was not going to do that, where nutritionally you are deficit, have to take these liquid vitamins all your life. It's a very long, extensive surgery. This was the newer, what they call sleeve gastrectomy. It makes the stomach smaller, and so you can't eat as much at a time. And I'll just hold it to that brief thing because this isn't about that surgery. But the reason I'm explaining all that is obviously my caloric restriction really came down. I was really restricted. I lost 90 pounds in less than 6 months, and that was at the top of what people lose for this type of surgery. I felt good. I was working out again. I was holding my own for, I think, 3 years afterwards before I started putting it back on. Now, I've only put, I shouldn't say only, it's still horrible, but I've put about half the weight back on. I never have gone up above this, and I keep bouncing around where I am now on the road. And I was shocked that I started putting it back on. Of course, it does stretch a little in time, and I did probably push where I eat a little bit more. I never had to worry about what I ate because I could eat only such a small amount at one time. So I went off my Coke for a year, but eventually went back on it. And I decided that was the number one culprit. So I went off again this last January. That in and of itself has shocked me, has not made a difference in my weight. I thought it would. But we'll discuss some other things that we're all going to try to do together that will do it. But because I ate so little for so long, And with that, you can't eat much at one time, which is kind of embarrassing when you're with other people. You eat about 2 or 3 bites, especially if something heavy like meat, and you're done. But they say you should eat more often, and that's really hard on the road, especially if you have 2 meetings a day. I usually end up with 1 meal a day, and then want to eat again before I go to bed after the meeting and after you're celebrating and happy with other people, instead of a bunch of smaller meals. So that's the first problem. But and then I started eating the wrong things because I couldn't eat much at one time. I thought it doesn't matter if I have a little bite of a cake or whatever. I can eat so little. Well, it did matter, because again, those things are much higher in calories. But here's the part I really want to emphasize: because I ate so little for so long, the metabolism really slowed. And once there was that plateau point, it was so slow that as I began to eat just a little bit more, the weight exploded. Because now I imagine I got used to eating only about 800 calories a day. So if you even start to eat 11 or 1200 a day, that's not even as much as a lady my height and weight should eat. But again, it's so much more than I was used to eating, that's what happens when your body goes into survival mode. Now, mine may have done it because of a surgery, but some of you that have done a lot of extensive dieting, you've put your own body into the same survival mode, where if you restrict your calories that much, you'll never be able to eat halfway like a normal person, or even for your height and weight again, until you bring that metabolism up. And the number one thing to bring it up is not only activity, but muscle. Muscle will bring your metabolism up. And we're kind of out of time. I can't believe just laying down the foundation for this. To teach it correctly is taking a lot of time. But I will tell you this, that I also recommend you get a good body fat muscle measuring suit. Pastor Kenneth Howard Brown was telling me about it at the river, that their family has bought one. And so I ordered one. I'm looking for where it's at now, but I remember it was called Zozo. And Zozo, I believe, bodysuit. You can look it up on the web and order it. It wasn't that much. I want to say, I was thinking 40 or 50. Somebody else here thinks maybe it was 80. But it will measure your percentage of, it looks ridiculous. I wasn't about to be that vulnerable and try it on and show you. You put it on and you set your phone, your camera back a little ways, and you have to rotate, and it tells you to keep rotating as it gets you from all sides as you turn in a circle. And then as you start gaining muscle and losing fat, it will say, even though the scale may say the same, it will say something like, but I have only put it on twice and I haven't done enough. Actually, it said I increased in body fat the second time. That was so disgusting, and I don't take it with me on the road. I probably will have to start now. But now that I'm actually doing a program, I'm going to start putting it on once a week. So I do recommend you get that as well. And we'll start getting into some other things next week. I hope this helped you. God bless you.